welcome to today's webinar, the Wednesday webinar here at TimeSolv, our monthly get-together where we like to show you the tips and tricks to get the most out of TimeSolv. I'm Scott Clayson, Director of Marketing for TimeSolv, and your intrepid host, coming to you from what has been a very chilly Minnesota here in November. I think they were showing on the news this morning that every day but one this month so far has been below normal, and we're going to be happy to get to 40 degrees today. So wherever you may happen to be, odds are the weather is probably better. So just to, again, recap for everybody who might be new to these webinars, we send out a tip of the week, generally on Monday mornings or on Monday afternoons, sometimes on Tuesdays like yesterday, with ongoing education of how TimeSolv features work in case you may have forgotten since you were trained with TimeSolv, or if you didn't go through our essentials training, maybe you never even knew about some of these features. And of course, our tip of the weeks are also a way to introduce new features to TimeSolv. So that's why we do these Wednesday webinars where I recap essentially the previous 4 weeks worth of tip of the weeks so that you can see them in action. So our next webinar, just so we're putting that on the calendar, we'll be doing one again. This is the second Wednesday of every month. So Wednesday, December 12th will be our last Wednesday webinar of the year. I plan on these usually last about 45 minutes or so. Maybe we'll go as long as an hour, but definitely I will cut it off at an hour to respect everyone's time. Everyone is on mute for the webinar. However, you can submit chat questions to me in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You should see a little chat icon. If you click on that, that'll fly out the chat column, and you can ask questions. And as always, I do ask to refrain on asking questions until after I've gone through all of our sections, because I often find that people will have a question and then perhaps I answer it 30 seconds later in the course of as I'm going through something. So it's easy to get ahead sometimes of think about a question, then I just answered it. So just be aware of that. So for everyone that's here, thank you for joining us, and let's get rolling. Okay, so today's webinar, we're going to go over, there actually were 5 weeks between our two webinars. So the tip of the week that we pushed out just yesterday, I'm not going to be going through on this session unless we have tons of extra time, which normally we don't. So I think we'll be okay. So we are going to run over our split billing capabilities. That's a feature that we rolled out in January of this year. And it's a very popular feature, and one that we want to make sure people are aware of how to use it and how to set it up. Then we'll next go over our rate options. I think this is really where TimeSolv stands out versus a lot of our competitors, is the breadth and depth of the rate options that you can apply to any client or any matter that your firm might be working on. Then we're going to talk about a new feature that was just released a couple of weeks ago, and that is adding your trust balance to the balance due section of an invoice so that it's easy for your clients to see what their current trust balance is right in the flow of looking at the balance due for that invoice. So we'll talk about where you can set that up. And then our last tip, and I know we've gone over this one before, but it's one that is worth repeating because this comes in a lot from to our support staff, and that is what really is the difference between an invoice and a statement. That might seem like a fundamental thing for a lot of you that are attending this webinar, who, especially those that are billing managers and you do the billing every week, but for some people where they are doing the billing for a firm and billing isn't their first skill set that they might have, understanding the difference between an invoice and a statement is important. So we'll just run over that briefly. So that's what we plan on getting to today. So let's go ahead and roll into split billing. So there's a couple of different things you have to get into place when you decide that you want to split the billing between two separate clients and essentially two separate matters. And this comes into play a lot, I know, from talking to a lot of family law attorneys who might be assigned as mediators by the court, and they have to split their bill for the couple that they're doing mediation on. And there's other obviously examples, but I think of family law as an area that is very much has a need for split billing, where you have to take the work that you did and send it to two different parties, and there's an agreement as to what percentage of the bill is being paid by each party. So we're first going to designate in TimeSolv, you need to designate one of the matters you're going to be splitting as the master matter. That's the matter that you're going to be actually making time entries for when you go about actually doing the work. And then I'll walk you through how you actually split the invoice itself when it comes to creating the draft invoice. Then it will show you how the time and expense entries get split as well. The original time entries get split. I'll show you a draft invoice, and then we'll talk about what happens if you need to undo a split invoice and the split time entries. So there's a couple of different things you need to steps you have to follow here. So let's go ahead and get into TimeSolv here. And as you can see, I'm logged in my dummy account, and I'm going to make sure I'm at 110%. I want to make sure you guys could see this okay, but I think we should be in good shape. So the first thing that we want to do is I'm going to make the assumption that when you decide to split, let me back up. When you decide you want to split a bill, you do need to create a whole separate 2 different clients or 3 different clients, or how many different clients are going to be paying the bill, and create different matters for those clients. So even though you're going to be splitting, it's maybe one matter that you're working on in your mind. From the system's point of view, it's 2 separate matters, 2 separate clients. So in this scenario, let's just pretend that we're going to, I already have a November webinar client set up and a November webinar, excuse, this should say matter, not client. In fact, let me change that right now. So this is, let's just say this is going to be the master matter that we're going to create split entries for. And the other one that I'm going to, I want to split it with is going to be this client A matter, we'll call it A, B, matter C when we get to it. It doesn't matter at this point, you don't have to select it. But let's start with, you want to designate what's going to be the master matter. So in this case, it's that November matter, November webinar matter. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the matter here by clicking on it. And I'm going to notice, you'll notice over here for all your matters, you do have a tab called split billing. Okay, so what we're going to do is click on that tab, and you have 2 different ways in which to split your invoices. You can just purely split it by the hours worked and the amount due. That's probably the scenario for the majority of people who need to do split billing. But we also have the ability to split the hours and calculate the amount. Then that's based on if you have 2 different clients that you're billing at 2 different rates. So let's say that this November matter, you have a matter rate that's unique. You're charging a different rate than your default rate. But that other one that we're going to split it with, maybe they do follow the default rate. So in that case, you could just say, just split the hours and then calculate the amount based on the matter rates for each client or matter. Hope that makes sense. For the majority of people, you're going to be just splitting the hours and the amount. So what we want to do is we want to add all the various matters that are going to end up being split and determine what % of the final invoice total is going to be due to that particular client or matter. So we're going to just add, by default, we want to add the first one right here, and it comes up by default. And I'm going to say that they're going to receive the remainder amount of whatever the other matter is going to pay. So I'm going to keep these boxes checked. You can see I can't put in percentages here. I'm going to hit save. Then I'm going to add my other client that's going to be helping to pay this bill. And that's going to be client A, matter B. And in this case now, I'm going to determine these people are only going to pay 25% of the bill for time entries. And you can make your expense entries a different split if you need to, but we're going to say 25%. percent here. It's important to note, you can split this whatever percentages you need to. You also can add, you don't have to split a bill between just two matters. You could add as many different clients as you need to. If you have some scenario, let's say it's something to do with an estate, and the siblings, there's 5 siblings, and they've all agreed to, pay a portion of the bill for the work you have to do because their parents passed away, whatever it might be, and they all want to get separate invoices with just their percent that they're going to be paying for the work you're doing. You could create 5 different clients, 5 different matters, and add them to this split billing matter area here and put in the percentages as need be. The key thing is just to make sure you have your master matter here. Okay, so now we have this in place. Now we can start making time entries against the master matter. Here's the other kind of fun part about our split billing feature. You don't have to do this ahead of time. If you know you're going to be, maybe you don't even know that you have to do split billing for a particular, say you started doing that family estate work, and there was the point person for those 5 siblings came to you, contracted the work, and you started making time entries for just that one client matter. Then he came back, or she came back 2 weeks later and said, oh, by the way, can we split the bill 5 ways? Because my other 4 siblings are all going to be contributing to this. It's like, oh, well, crap, I wish I'd known that ahead of time. It's okay here. Even if you already have time entries against the master matter, you can come back and add the people you want to split it with. So that's, I think, a nice feature that we offer, is that this can be done retroactively. As long as you haven't created a draft invoice yet, you can take existing time entries that are already there for the master matter and add somebody that you want to split it with. So I haven't done that yet. So let's go over here into our time entry page. And we're going to go into our November webinar client, and we're going to do 3 hours worth of work. All right. And then we're going to go over here. And yesterday I did some work for them. It's November, right? November webinar. I did 4 hours worth of work. And as you can see, as of right now, this looks like any other normal time entries. We have 2 of them here. Now you've done all the work. You're ready to do all the invoicing for a month or for the end of the matter, whatever it might be. So what we recommend and what we advocate as a best practice is you go under invoices and drafts and just create a draft invoice for that one master matter to start. It just makes it easier. Okay, so I'm going to go in here to this November webinar. I'm going to hit create. And it's going to tell me this matter is set up to be split, but this minus sign tells me that it's an unsplit invoice. So you have that visual cue. And then I can just review the draft as I need to, like you normally do for any other draft invoice, and take a look at it and see, okay, here's my 2 blah, 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 time entries, so on and so forth. Okay, wonderful. Looks good. We're ready to go. It's been approved. So let's go ahead and void that back to draft. We're going to recreate that draft invoice almost exactly like we just did, but now we want to split it. So I'm going to choose the master client. Okay. Now down here, you see this split row here. You want to check this box, say, yes, I want to split this invoice. You create it. Now we have 2 separate invoices that have been split by the percentages that you designated. And you have in the split column telling you that this is a split invoice. And if we go over and view those time entries that we made, you'll notice they've now been split appropriately. Okay, and they're pending, because pending means they're on a draft invoice. Now, I am using for these drafts the billing template, my generic flexible billing template. I'm pretty sure I am. Let me double check that. Yeah, I am. I want to do one thing here. Yeah. So by default, we do have a split billing section here in the global settings. It's turned off. So what that means is when I go to view the individually split invoices, they're not going to really tell me, the client who's getting this doesn't necessarily know that this invoice is split. And you'll see it. This looks like any other invoice. It's going to show, the hours they've been, the rate, everything's been split basically, and what they owe. Okay, they've been split by the percentage, but they don't know that here, unless you decide you want to go ahead. And what we recommend is you create a billing template that's specifically for your split billing clients. And you can choose that. You can see I chose the split billing template. When I go to edit it, the only thing I've done different with this template is I've checked this box that I want to show the split billing summary, and you can title it however you want to title it. Maybe you don't want to call it split billing. Maybe you call it shared fee summary. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. You can have that option for how it appears on the invoice. So I've chosen the split billing template. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Go back and do a preview now of one of these invoices. And now you can see I have my split billing summary. And it'll show me here that client A is paying 25% of fees. We don't have any expenses, and we didn't designate any split of expenses. And November webinar person is doing 75% of the rest. They had the remainder. Recall that we had the remainder. The reason why we don't just say, hey, one person's going to pay 75, the other's going to pay 25 is obviously the math isn't always going to add up exactly perfectly. You're going to end up with like a long, several decimal point type thing if you go to split this exactly 75%, exactly 25%. So that's why we just say remainder, so it'll round up as needed. So the person who doesn't as the remainder gets that roundup is all that really means. So now you have that summary. So now when this person gets their bill, they can see very clearly that there was $1,855 worth of fees, and this is how it's been split. So it's very clear. So again, you don't have to include that if you don't want to, but that is the option, and you do need to just check that box on your template that you're going to use for these clients. Now, what happens if happens? You got to go back. There's been something screwed up, whatever it might be, and you need to update the split entries, or you need to do something with the original time entry. Well, as you saw, these have already been split. They've been pending. They're, what do I do? So here's what happens. Obviously, the first step, if you need to do any fixes, first of all, you could click on this unique specific invoice, come in here and edit the entry. If you need to edit the entry for this, it's editing the split entry, you can. But if you need to kind of unwind the spool here, click on both of these, void them back to draft. And here's what's important to note. Just because you voided the draft, these entries are still split, as you can see. So how do I unsplit them if I need to? You go back to the master matter, go to split billing, click on here where it says undo split entries. Hit OK. Then you're going to go back to the time entries, and it says the unused split entries. They're unused because they were placed, the draft invoices were deleted or voided. So now those are unused time entries. That's why it says unused. You go back to these time entries, and now you'll just see the original time entry not split. So that's how you would do it. And then you could even come in here again, and that guy calls you back. Says, oh, just kidding. We really don't need it as a split bill. Just send me one invoice. Then you just come in here and delete this, delete that, and you're back to ground zero. So that's how you do split billing. It's fairly straightforward, but there's some steps. The key ingredient here to remember is you need to create a whole separate client and separate matter that you're going to. So I know I've talked to some others, they get a little confused. They're like, well, it's the same. I'm working on just one matter. So what do you mean I need to create a whole separate matter? It's not a separate matter. It's like, well, in our system, you have to designate it as such, that you have the separate client with a separate billing contact, all of that information, perhaps even a separate billing rate. And they need to create a separate matter. You can call it the same thing if you want as the master one, but that's just kind of the one wrinkle, I guess, in doing that. And then when you create your draft invoices, we recommend, like we said, that you set them up, or you create just a regular generic draft invoice first, but when you're ready to, check the box for split, and it's going to now split any matters that you have designated to be split. So I did just the one because I chose that particular client. So I hope that is clear for everybody about how you do your split billing in TimeSolv. Oh, I'm sorry. Brian asked if I could increase the size. I just now saw that. My apologies. Let me make that even just a little bigger. So I just now checked into the chat. So my apologies, Brian, to that. And Monique had a little issue with the sound, but now she can hear it okay. So I think everyone's in a good place now. Okay, so let's talk about our next topic at hand here. And that is me figuring out how to work a PowerPoint presentation. We'll just keep it here. Rate options. One of the strengths of TimeSolv is the ability to create a lot of variables in the rates that get applied to your time entries. Well, not expenses, just your time entries. So we have 6 different rate types. And even within one of them, the task rate, you can get creative. So most of you probably know this, but I want to review this anyway. You have your timekeeper default rate, right? That's the rate that is when you're looking at your professionals here and you click on any one of them, they have their default rate right here that you can change, okay? Then we also have a task rate. And so when you choose a specific task that you have a rate applied to, it will change that rate for just that task. Then it'll kick back to the timekeeper default for every other task that you may assign. And I'm going to show you how we go through each one of those in just a second. Then we have a global rate. This can be great for those of you that perhaps you have a client you're doing work for, you're doing tons of different matters for them, and you've negotiated a special rate for just that company, just that customer. You could create a global rate and even just name it by the name of that customer and know that any matter you create for them will have that particular rate when you apply it to them. Then we have, again, task and then global rate. So again, it's that same designation that if you specify a task to be a certain rate, it'll grab that first when you choose that task when making a time entry, and then it'll go with the global rate. And then you can do it the most granular way is a specific matter rate. And then again, the task rate is the same way. So let's walk through how you do all of these things here. Timekeeper default, pretty easy. I just showed you how to do that. When it comes to creating a task rate, when you go under time and settings, and you go to the task codes right here, pardon me, I just clicked on the wrong button here. I want to make sure that if there's questions, I can see them. Most of you are probably using TimeSolv Legal, which has the built-in ABA task codes, the codes that are used for leads billing and so on, which is what I have here. You can determine that if you want a specific task code, and again, you can create your own custom task codes as you see fit as well. But let's say that whenever you are doing, I don't know, let's just pick something. Whenever you're doing case administration, you charge a smaller rate. I'm just pretending, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this built-in code that I have. And I'm going to say that this is going to be an hourly rate type. And I'm going to charge, instead of charging my normal default rate, I'm only going to charge, $90 an hour. Or you could, as you noticed, apply the rate by task. In other words, it doesn't matter when you go to make that time entry, it doesn't matter how much time you enter. It's always going to be whatever rate you designated for that task. So maybe you say, even if it takes 3 hours, 1 hour, a half hour, 5 minutes, whenever I do case administration or whatever the task may be, I charge $90. So perhaps you could think of scenarios where that might be the case. So that you can do it by by hour or by the task itself. Now, this is going to then be the rate for every timekeeper across the board who chooses this task code when making time entries. And maybe you don't want that. Maybe one of your timekeepers, you want it to be in proportion to their normal hourly rate. Maybe everything with this case administration task, across the board, all your timekeepers always charge 50% less than their normal default rate. Well, how do I do that? Well, you can do that one of two ways. You could do it right here within the settings, but the best place to do it is when you're over on the clients and matters side, the actual matter you might be working on. Actually, I'm going to go to that November one. That's a good one to use. So hopefully most of you know. If not, here's a good review of where do I actually change the rates for a client or matter. Well, you can go first if you click on the client. No, I'm sorry. I take that back. Click on the matter. You go to the specific matter that you have. And under the general tab down here, by default, it's always going to be timekeeper default. But let's say you do want to do it by task, then timekeeper default. Hit save. Then you can edit your rates for that. And this is where you click on here. And this is where you can say, okay, for Scott Laidlaw, when they do B150, meetings and communications with creditors. Okay, so I did that other one. Scott's rate is going to be 200. But if Mike Hegman does that same exact task, his rate is going to be 100. This is how you can specify a task rate by the timekeeper themselves. So now if I come in here and B150 for November, and I'm logged in as I'm the Scott Laidlaw is my dummy account. So if I come in here to November and I pick that task code B150, notice right here, normally it has my normal default is 165, but as soon as I picked this task code, it changed to 200. And it'll be for this task code only. Any other task I chose, it's going to go back to my default. But if I come in here and because I'm the admin here, I could do a time entry for this Mike Hegman. So if Mike Hegman is working on this matter and he does B150, his rate now is $100 an hour. So you can see that's how you can get really flexible with this versus if you designate an entire task, no matter who's working on it at a specific rate, like I showed you here. Now, say this B150, notice it says $180 an hour. Well, that is an hourly rate that I designated, but I did get very specific, and I can come over here to this edit rates. Okay, so if you come in here and edit rates, this is where you can come up and say, these are all the matters. If I double click this is going to show me all the matters I have that I've chosen task as a rate for that matter. And you can see it's just a handful, but it includes it's showing me here like my by professional. If I haven't done new ones here, this is where I could create it. So you can create it on both sides, but it's showing me already that I have the November webinar. Here's the rates that I designated as you saw before, and I could edit them over on this side too. This is where I could change it. It gets a little confusing doing it on this side, I think. It's easier to do it on the matter side. But the task rates is where you can get the most flexible in changing your rates by whatever it is that you're doing, where you might have a different rate. I know some attorneys will charge a different rate if they're appearing in court, whatever it might be. So this is where you go about doing that. The next rate option that you have that is really convenient is that global rate. And again, you'll find that you can go under clients and matters, and you would click on the specific matter itself, and instead of tasks then whatever, you could open it up. You can see global rate here and hit save. Now it's going to show all the global rates that I've already established and that I want to apply. And let me show you where you can do that. Again, you go back under time to settings, and once we get past our task codes, we get our global rates. These are, I've just created these. You can create any new global rate you want. And I was using that example that if you say I'm doing a lot of work for Best Buy, their headquarters here in Minneapolis, and say I'm an attorney that does a lot of work for them, but I've negotiated a special rate. then I can just apply this Best Buy rate to every single matter I create for Best Buy. And you come in here, and this is where you can edit the rates that you might have. It'll show you every timekeeper, what their default rate is, and what the global rate's going to be. You can create a new global rate anytime you want. Just name it, give it a description, and then you can edit those rates. Again, you don't have to edit the rates for everybody, as you noticed when I opened this. So it doesn't have to be every single person. If Tom Rafferty is still going to be using their default rate for Best Buy, then just leave it blank. If you apply, I did some sample ones, a 20% nonprofit rate. This is really a nice feature to create if you're going to be charging a rate from last year or your previous year's rate. So maybe you have a client that you're starting work for now in November, and you promise them, like, look, I normally change my rates every January 1st. And I know we're going to be continuing to work on this matter through the end of April. So I'm going to keep the rate that we're starting with now in November for you, even for stuff that I do next year once I up my rate. Well, then you just come in here and you create a 2018 global rate, apply it to that matter, and you won't have any entry that you do in February or March or whatever of next year, as long as it's following this global rate that you've applied, it'll by default, create time entries at that rate. So here's another let me get one last thing in here. And that is the matter rates. And this is the most granular place where you actually set the rates right at that client level. So you come into the client right here. And again, I was choosing global rate, which gave me my various options for what I wanted to do here. Then I can choose, I want to do just a matter rate. I click save. Then I'm going to get the option to edit those rates right here. And these rates now will only apply for this specific matter. Here's a question we also get, and this is kind of a bonus sort of addition, is what happens if we change our rates before we've invoiced anybody and they're by default? So, because as most of you probably know, if I came in here, if I've been working on this matter for 6 months and I have hundreds of time entries at the default, say it was default timekeeper rate, right? And oh shoot, now I got to change that, and I created a global rate, or I want to create a specific matter rate. How do I go about changing all those old time entries to my new rate? A lot of people think that what you have to do is go back to every single solitary time entry. Maybe you do a time entry search and find all those time entries for that particular client. It's what do I have for Best Buy here? And find all those time entries, and one at a time edit them and change the rate to whatever my new rate, might be. You don't have to do that. You can do a mass update of unbilled time entries if you've changed the rates. If you've changed your default rate, so say, you are gonna, and I know this is a scenario that comes up a lot for those that do class action lawsuits. There's a firm that we work with out in DC where, they've been working on a matter for years. Since 2015, I think. And one of the things I guess from what I've understood is when the case is finally settled, the law firm is allowed to charge at what their rate is today, not their rate from when they did the work necessarily in 2015, 2016, 2017, and so on. So they need to update all those old time entries. They've been sitting there as unbilled entries for 3 years, waiting to get billed out at the end of the class action lawsuit. And they want to know, how do I go about updating all of those old time entries if I don't want to do them one by one, and who would? So you would go under, once you update the rate itself, so say they were using the timekeeper default rate and it was, it's now 265, and you want to update all those old entries, you could go under here, time to settings, go to rate changes, and let's choose like a particular matter you might have worked on. I'm going to do all the Best Buy ones. I'm going to hold down the shift key and select all of these. Let's say you can do a time frame of, when did I do these entries? Maybe you want to do all the ones from 2016, whatever it might be. And you can include time entries where the rate was overridden when you created that rate, you hand and changed it. you could include those time entries. You hit a search, and you can see now I have, for Tony Hill here, his old rate was $100 and his new rate now is $200. So if I want to update all of these unbilled time entries, I just click this button and say update rates. So this is a really fast way to update. I'm going to do all the matters here. I'm going to search for all these time entries that have an old rate that could be updated if you want. Of course, you don't have to. If you need to keep it at that old rate, you can. But if you've updated either your default rate, your global rate, the matter rate, whatever it might be, if you've changed it and you need to retroactively update the time entries, this is the place you do it, under rate changes. You could select all of these. I mean, how many do I have here? Probably 30, maybe 40, and then update them all with just one click. So that saves a ton of time if you need to update rates for time entries that have already been created. So hopefully everyone finds some value in that. Okay, so that's rate options. And like we said, you can do a lot with them, especially with those task code rates. You can get really flexible about how you want to change the rates as you're making these time entries. So let's keep moving forward here. And let's talk about adding the trust balance to the balance due section of an invoice. Basically, you just need to edit your billing template because it was not turned on by default. So this is something we just released a couple of weeks ago, in which if you go under Invoices to Settings and look at your flexible billing templates, so we'll go to our flexible templates tab. Oh, a question just came in from Lisa Cosner. Yeah, you were asking, are you able to watch this webinar at a later date if I need to review the content? Absolutely. We send out a link. In fact, I believe our webinar software here should send out that link automatically to you once the recording is been processed. So you will get that a link to the recording. Plus, we do put all of these on our YouTube channel. There's a Wednesday webinar playlist that we have, so you can watch all the previous Wednesday webinars if you'd like. And I don't recommend doing all at once. You'd get very tired of listening to my voice, that's for sure. So good question, Lisa. So we're looking at where you go to add the balance due to your invoice. And if you open up any one of your billing templates you might have, you'll notice something new here under global settings, and that is you'll see a note line here of include trust balances and balance due. Now, by default, it's still going to be turned off. We did not turn that on automatically. So if you'd like to see the trust balances and the balance due, you need to open up your billing templates and just check this box and hit update. And what that's going to end up showing then, let me turn it off, turn it back off here for a second so you can see it in action. So let's go and to our November webinar, and let's make a trust deposit. Actually, I got to do it over here. Actually, I got to set up the trust account first. So I'm going to go to my trust tab. I'm going to add a new trust account. I'm going to name it retainer. I'm going to say if it falls below $500, replenish it up to $5,000. I'm going to auto pay the invoice from trust. Yes. I'm going to hit save. Now let's make a deposit into trust, payment into trust. So it's our November webinar, and we are depositing $5,000 to start. Save. Wonderful. Okay, so now if I go back, just double check that real quick. It should be recorded here under my matter. Yep, there's it showing me the deposit of $5,000 that happened today. So let's go to our time entries, and let's go back. Okay, so I have these $795 there. I have $1,060 here. So let's go ahead and create a draft invoice. Great, the total amount is $1,855. Now, when I view this, because this is still in draft mode, when it shows the balance of my trust account, it's still going to show it at that $5,000. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. It won't show me anything because I unchecked that box, right? So it just tells me here's my balance due. $18.50. It doesn't really tell me anything about how my trust account is coming into play, other than it's showing me on the statement of account that I have a $5,000 amount in my trust. But if I come in here, click on the dollar amount, go to my flexible billing template, check include trust balances, hit update, come back, take a look at my preview again here. Now it's going to show me my trust balance. And again, because I haven't sent this yet and nothing's been deducted yet from the trust account, it's showing me the trust balance of $5,000. Now it's showing me total available credit for client, $31.45, because it's telling me that's what's going to end up being paid. So let's go ahead and click on it, send it. Now when I go to my sent invoices, it's right there. Download it. Let's take a look at it. And I look at that invoice, and hopefully you guys can see this okay. But now it shows me my trust balance is at $31.45, and my total available credit is $31.45, obviously, because I had this set up to automatically pay the invoice from my trust account, so that $18.55 has been paid, and it's showing me the trust balance. So it's a nice thing for your clients to quickly see what their trust balance is when they're looking at literally the bottom line. They don't have to necessarily come down here at the statement of account to see what their retainer account is at. So it's just a nice little addition that you can turn on and turn off as you'd like to. We just make it's an easier way for your client to digest the invoices. Okay. Question, can you obtain the PowerPoint presentation? Sure, I can send that. I haven't done that before. There's not a lot of beef to it, to be perfectly honest. It's basically just what you're seeing here. But I'd be more than happy to send that along if you'd like. No problem. And let's get to our last then kind of tip for the day. It's a simple one. A lot of you probably are already pretty well aware of the difference between invoices and statements, but you'd be surprised how many calls we get from clients that aren't fully aware exactly. They are not interchangeable words in TimeSolv, or really in accounting, period. So really the main difference, obviously an invoice is a display of work that's been completed in the time period you've designated and what the balance due is. And it gives all the granular detail of that work. As you know, it'll just show you as much or as little as you want to show based on your billing template. It can show you, all of the details. Let's just go to a sent invoice, right? You guys know this. You've seen a million of these invoices. It's showing you all the details all the time, everything you want to include. You can include a statement of account if you've designated your template to include a statement of account. Some people, especially if you've been working with a client for years and years, they don't want to include a statement of account because it can get pretty long, pages and pages worth of stuff. So they don't necessarily want to include that in every invoice. And again, hopefully everyone knows that you go under invoices again to settings, go to your flexible templates, click on it to edit. And you can go over here to the statement page and just say, yes, include the page, or don't include the page. It's that simple. If you don't want to include it because it may just have too long, that's fine. So that's, essentially an invoice, right? It won't include any previous work on there, obviously, other than what was, what you designated for the time and expense entries for the date that you created for the invoice. Simple enough. Now, statements. You create statements under invoices. They're just reminders of balance due. So if you don't have any new work for a client when you're invoicing for, November, let's say, but they still have a balance due, you want to send them a reminder. And I know people have asked in the past, could we do an auto reminder where if they don't pay, or there's no payment or allocation to an invoice within a certain period of time, could TimeSolv send out automatically a statement about a balance due? And we do not have that feature in place at this point. I think it would be lovely to have that, but it's not there right now, obviously. So to create then a statement, you go under Invoices, you go to Statements, and you click here where it says New Statements. And you can do a couple things. You can do it for all your clients. You can do it for just your matters only. You could include a statement that has clients with zero balance, but generally that's not the whole point of generating a statement. Then you can designate no invoice since date. That's important. So if they have not received an invoice since, like, say, October 1st, in other words, you haven't done much recent work for them, then show me the statement and hit create. And you can see now, if you want to send all of these, just like you send invoices, you can either by email or the printer, which is the download, as you all know. You can also just download them individually if you'd like. You can check this box and you can either download it here, you can hit download, you can just send it one at a time, whatever it might be. Let's download one, because the question then often does come up as it's creating this here. There we go, it's ready. How is my statement going to look? The statement is going to look just like whatever you have designated for the billing template you use for this particular client. So if you designate the statement of account that, you know, for your invoice, let's say, a certain way, it's going to show up this way as well. The other important thing to note is that you can only generate these statements at the client level, not specifically by a matter. So if you have a contact, for example, that's different than, maybe you have one main contact at Best Buy, but you've worked on 10 different matters, and each one of those matters has to get billed to a certain person. When you go to create an overall statement and you select email as the option, it's going to go to whoever is the main contact or the optional invoice contact at the client level. So just be aware of that. Here's the other caveat, if you will. These statements don't get saved in TimeSolv like they do, like sent invoices do. If you would like a copy of these statements, you need to go ahead and download it yourself as a PDF and file it somewhere, you know, in your file structure. Because once you navigate, I've created all these, once you navigate away from these, they're gone. So if I go over here and go to my sent invoices, or wherever, it doesn't even matter where I happen to go, and I come back to my statement page, you know, I have no record of those ones I had just created. Now you can create them again, but just be aware that they are not saved within TimeSolv. So I'll reemphasize that. If you want, you know, the statement that you've generated, if you want a record of it, you're going to want to download a record, which is easy enough to do, especially if you, you know, these all, you know, you can set it up and say, hey, you know, you can click all of these here and click download. And it's going to download all of them. And then you could batch save them into a folder called October balance statements, or whatever you want to call it, or November, you know, whatever it is. So it's not optimal, I don't think, but that way, if the client does come back and say, hey, I know you sent me that statement, but I accidentally deleted the email, can you send it to me again? That sort of scenario, you at least then have that backup that you could go to that folder and resend it if need be. So I highly encourage you who are sending statements to download them and save them as you need to, in case you have to do anything again with them. Okay, that's everything for today. We covered a lot of ground. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out to us at support@timesolv.com. You can call our 1-800 number. You can always submit feature ideas to this address, timesolv.ideas.aha, basically .io. And you know, you can upvote And you can, even if you don't have a great idea right now for a feature enhancement, go to this page. You can see ideas that others have submitted, and you can upvote on those ideas if you like it and want to see it in TimeSolv. And that our developers check in on those to help them determine what should come up next in development. And as I mentioned to Lisa, yes, there will be a recording of this webinar that will be, I believe it's set to be sent to you directly after it gets done processing. I'll double check that. And if not, I will make sure that you guys get a copy of it sent to you once we get it on our YouTube channel as well. So for everybody who sat through this webinar today, thank you. I should ask, I guess, are there any questions about anything that you've seen so far that was not answered? I did mention that I would have a Q&A, didn't I? And I haven't really lived up to that. So if you do have any questions of what you've seen, from like how to do split billing to the balance due, to what statements are, to anything else, rate options, let me know right now, and I'll be happy to answer them before we sign off. Or if you think of something after we sign off, shoot me an email. And I could be more than happy to, if I don't know the answer, which sometimes for the really detailed questions I don't, since I'm not a support person, who works here every day in the TimeSolv app, I can certainly pass it along and make sure I get the answer. So if we don't have any other questions, then everybody have a great Thanksgiving weekend next week, and we'll talk to you all in December. So thank you, everybody, and we will definitely talk soon. Bye-bye now.